Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
Positronic Hypersonic.
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the Section 31 movie, which just premiered on Paramount Plus today. And as it starts, in the mirror universe, some years ago, a young Philippa Georgiou returns home to the joy of her loved ones after 2 years. Apparently, she'd been away participating in some type of Hunger Games type contest to determine who would be the new emperor, because of course, that's how you figure that out. Anyway, having beaten everyone but one other person, she had one final task she had to complete in order to become emperor, and that was to kill her own family, which she does by poisoning them, at which point a huge ship shows up at her location, whereupon squad after squad after squad of soldiers beam down, and a woman explains that the other person could not kill their own family, so his family was murdered along with everyone else in his village. At which point, she gives Philippa an imperial cloak and presents her with the other person, who's destined now to live at her heel. At which point, he's commanded to kneel before Philippa, and she grabs a big old sword. Apparently, they had had some kind of tryst during the 2 years, and would tell each other that they were two but one. So she repeats this line with him, only to then say, "Not anymore," before burning the side of his face with the hot blade, presumably killing him. Many years later, in a very Dick and Jane style expository voiceover, a Section 31 team leader is given a mission of tracking Philippa down after she'd left Section 31 and stopped communicating with Starfleet. Meanwhile, under a fake name, Philippa holds court at a kind of fancy space station where she's approached by a very serious human gentleman who seemingly has a business proposal for her. But she sees right through him and realizes that he's an agent of Section 31, whose whole team is in the space station bar. She then proceeds to give us the breakdown of all the agents and their personalities and other traits. But of course, this is disguised as her showing off how well she can pick people out and read them to the team leader. Anyway, one of the team members is a Deltan woman. Another is Vulcan, who apparently doesn't follow the teachings of logic. Another is some Australian guy in a mech suit who apparently suffers from something called mechandysphoria. Another is a shapeshifter like we saw in Star Trek VI, and another is, of course, Lieutenant Rachel Garrett, who later becomes captain of the Enterprise C from the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise. He explains that though he's authorized to arrest her, he'd rather see her back in the Section 31 fold and offers her the chance to get back in, and she accepts. She's then introduced to the team formally, and it turns out that the Vulcan isn't exactly a Vulcan, but a robot that looks like a Vulcan being controlled by a really ugly, tiny creature with an Irish accent living inside the robot. Apparently, the team were simultaneously on another mission to prevent some guy from selling a bioweapon, which included the shapeshifter impersonating Georgiou after the team leader distracted her and incapacitated her, and the shapeshifter morphed into her in a process that looks nothing like what it looks like in Star Trek VI. Then, the not Vulcan robot guy was going to send out some kind of nanotech from his innards to invade a body modification on the person of the guy trying to sell the weapon so as to have control over him, at which point, for some reason, they were going to have the guy in the mechanical suit just punch him out, concluding this very much oversimplified plan that it seems could have been accomplished just with the nanotech thing without the need for any kind of shapeshifter or a guy in a mech suit. But Philippa says she has a simpler idea. So she meets the Mark and escorts him to his quarters, whereupon she attaches some kind of device to herself and the weapon, which makes it so that she phases in and out of that vibrational reality that she's standing in, along with the weapon, so that he can't grasp the case that his weapon is in anymore or hurt her. She then takes it away from him, and the guy in the suit knocks him out just before another guy who's also vibrating at a different frequency, but the same frequency as Georgiou, coincidentally, phases through the wall and starts shooting, at which point he and Philippa engage in fisticuffs. After a couple of minutes of that, she ends up chasing him through some walls that they're both able to phase right through, though they don't seem to phase through the floor. She catches up with him and gets the weapon back, and then they both turn off the vibration thing and rejoin, I guess, the physical world and continue fighting and running. This takes the fight into the bar, where the mysterious person is engaged by the Deltan member of the team, who very shortly thereafter gets killed, which sucked because she was kind of hot. Philippa and the mysterious person then re-engage their vibration things and continue to fight for the weapon, with it changing hands multiple times. The entire time they're being chased through the walls by the guy in the mech suit, Juggernaut style. Philippa ends up getting close to it but can't reach it because she gets stuck in a wall by her foot, at which point the man comes through the wall and grabs it. He then opens the case to remove it, and when she sees what it is, she says that it can't be that thing because she had ordered it destroyed at some point in the past. And when the team leader finds out that she knows what it is, he stuns her. In a flashback, we see that whatever it is, it was designed by Philippa's engineers when she was emperor. We also see that it was presented to her by her eternal supplicant, the person that she burned the face of, back when he failed to kill his own family and became emperor. She speaks to him about what they used to have, but he rebukes her as he dies, apparently having taken the same poison as her engineers who killed themselves after they made the weapon, which she seems very upset by. After waking up tied to a chair, Philippa manages to convince the team leader that he needs her in order to help him get the weapon back, which she can help him do if he tells her exactly what's going on. He tells her that he was born in the 20th century, but that he's been asleep for a long time after he was exiled when the augments took over his planet during the eugenics wars. He says that one of the augments took a liking to him and took him in and turned him into an augment himself. She then tells him that she knows what the weapon is, as well as that it's called the Godsend because she ordered it to be created in the beginning over in the Terran Empire, and that he needs to gather his people because they're going to need all of them. She further explains that it would wipe out a whole quadrant like a virus if set off. They then interrogate the guy who brought it to the Prime Universe through a tear created by an ion storm, of all things, which opens up on the regular, apparently. Among other things, he tells them that whatever the mysterious man who grabbed the weapon is, he knows about it because he learned about it from one of them, which seems to indicate that they have a mole on their team. Just after this, an explosion goes off and they have to transport off the ship before it explodes into tiny bits. The team then all try to figure out who the mole is, but none of them accuse the dead Deltan of being the mole for some reason. After that, they come up with a plan to split into two teams to try to salvage a nearby garbage scow and the communications array of the planet they're on. When the mech guy goes missing after apparently replacing a missing part of the communications array when no one was looking and sending out a signal, before then destroying the once missing part, the team leader and Lieutenant Garrett go looking for him and are soon joined by the shapeshifter and Philippa. After a time, they find the mech guy dead in a pit and soon suspect Lieutenant Garrett of having killed him, and indeed seem to find his blood under her fingertips, as well as one of her hairs on him. They're then able to access the footage of the machine suit that the machine guy was wearing, and it turns out that he killed himself for some reason. It further turns out that the little creature inside the fake Vulcan robot was behind it all by controlling the mech suit guy. When confronted, he uses the suit, which he is still in control of, to attack them, giving him a chance to try to escape, and them to chase him through some kind of tunnel on moving skiff-type vehicles, which the whole sequence just looked like shit. Eventually, only Philippa and the fake Vulcan robot are left on one of the little skiffs, and it ends up high in the sky after exiting the tunnel system and flying high above the surface. She ends up getting the best of him, and he explains that her old friend only faked his death and is in fact still alive before being beamed away by an unseen ship. Aboard said ship, we see that her old friend was the man who stole the weapon from her on the space station, and that he's been working with the fake Vulcan robot thing. The rest of the team tries to come up with a plan, but Philippa says she doesn't see how they can do anything because the communications array is busted and the ship won't fly. Of course, the ship probably has its own communications array, but they don't seem to talk about that. Apparently, the team leader acquired and hid the component they need to get the ship operational at some unknown point in all of these shenanigans, and they reinstall it to make the ship work. Since they know where their enemy is going, which of course is to the ion storm area, they soon catch up with him and find themselves fired upon. They then use the garbage scow's garbage-hauling tractor beams to tow him away from the area where the rift is going to open. The plan is to tow him into the nebula where the radiation will deteriorate his shields, though this will, of course, deteriorate their ship as well. Once their enemy shields are down, the team leader and Philippa beam over to her ship, but seem to find it empty, though of course it isn't, and her old friend emerges pointing a weapon at them. The not Vulcan guy then emerges and takes down the team leader, at which point Philippa and her old friend engage in hand-to-hand combat. Simultaneously, the weapon enters a countdown to detonation. The team ship is then attacked by a small ship being piloted by the entity from inside the not Vulcan robot. Apparently, her old friend is now in charge of the Terran Empire, and Philippa tries to talk him down, but he's not having it. Meanwhile, the fake Vulcan robot person, now on autopilot, is fighting the team leader. Lieutenant Garrett finds something she can use as a weapon in the hull of the garbage scout, which is full of garbage, though It shouldn't be because what it does is drag garbage from space into a nebula where it deteriorates. It doesn't transport it inside itself, according to the original description of how the ship operates. Anyway, she sets the ship's cargo up to explode when released from the cargo bay, so the cargo is released. Aboard the enemy ship, her old friend almost kills her, but Philippa manages to turn the tables and mortally wound him without intending to, and he dies in her arms, confessing his love for her. The enemy ship somehow makes it back to the Ion Storm opening, and Philippa plans to destroy it with the weapon by launching the ship into it with the bomb aboard. Garrett tries to beam her and the team leader away, but can't get a lock at first, but then eventually does. They then watch the passageway collapse. 3 weeks later, back aboard the space station, things in Philippa's bar seem to be back to normal, and when the team leader approaches, we learn that Philippa was debriefed and that an offer was made for her to rejoin Section 31, which she is considering, but it turns out not to be the team leader and is, in fact, the shapeshifter. The rest of the team does eventually show up, and we find out that Garrett's been promoted to lieutenant commander, as well as that the team is going to continue on, as well as that the little creature that was piloting the fake Vulcan had a wife who is now piloting an exact copy of the original Vulcan robot and now talks with a southern U.S. accent. They then get new orders from their commanding officer, played for some reason by Jamie Lee Curtis, and I suspect that reason is that she was in Everything Everywhere All at Once with Michelle Yeoh and that they are friends. And that's where the movie ends. So I have never liked the idea of Section 31 to begin with. I don't like the idea that Starfleet has a Black Ops division. I therefore never liked the idea of a Section 31 show. And I liked even less the idea of a Section 31 show with Michelle Yeoh's Philippa Georgiou character because I never really liked that character. I think she was wrong for the part because her accent made it difficult for her to deliver quippy lines. And the character's supposed to be quippy, and it never sounded right. And I just never liked any of it. And of course, it is, of course, fruit of the poison tree that was Star Trek Discovery on top of all that. So I watched this movie just to watch it because it's Star Trek and, because I have the channel. And I thought, maybe it'll be just a forgettable movie that's neither good or bad, that's just kind of there and is nothing of consequence in one direction or another. And I'm sad to report that it's much worse than that. This movie is just bad. Bad. And it's kind of sad because I thought that Michelle Yeoh did a better job playing this character than she has before. I think it worked a lot better than it ever has before. I liked seeing a Delton character, but of course they killed her off in the first few minutes. But other than those two things that I liked, there's nothing else to like about this movie. The characters are really caricatures, and none of them really have any redeeming qualities. They're all goofy as hell, and it's ridiculous. A guy in a mech suit, really? In Section 31? Like, really? The spy agency has a guy who goes around openly in a giant mech suit? It doesn't make any sense. And, a Vulcan that laughs and talks in an Irish accent, like, why? Because there's a little alien piloting him? Why does the alien speak in an Irish accent? What? Why did they choose a Vulcan conveyance when they know that he's going to stick out like a sore thumb? Like, what? It didn't make any sense to me at all. And there were other dumb things like, when they're phasing out of reality during that one part, they don't fall to the floor. And the bad guy just happens to have a phase out of reality thing on him as well. It's stupid. The garbage scow apparently doesn't have its own communications array, nor does it have any weapons, which, on the surface you would think makes sense because it's a garbage scow. It's not a warship. Why would it have weapons? Well, because there are people on it out there in space doing a job who might be attacked by hostile forces and they should be able to defend themselves. So the idea that it doesn't have weapons is just ridiculous. Of course, the whole movie is just a big MacGuffin chase to begin with, which makes it awful. And, they just tell us, that if this bomb goes off, it'll destroy a quadrant. Well, why? What's it made of? Like, what? It's the barest bones of a plot you could ever possibly come up with. They're chasing this MacGuffin through this movie. And, the movie never decides whether it wants to be funny or like sort of a dark action thing, because the characters, like I said, are goofy as hell, and they just spend the whole time of the movie being goofy and not at all behaving like A, Starfleet officers, and B, Starfleet officers in the spy division of Starfleet. It's so bad. And through the whole movie, Lieutenant Garrett keeps saying, "I'm Starfleet. This is why I act this way. Oh, this is why I won't act that way. I'm Starfleet. They're all Starfleet." So why does she keep saying that? It's just a bad movie. The fighting scenes were cool, but at the same time stupid because why don't they fall to the floor? How are they, you know, coincidentally on the same vibration frequency? The other fight sequence that takes place in the tunnel while they're on the skiffs looks terrible. You could totally tell the background was CGI. And I mean, of course it was, but you're not supposed to be able to tell. It looked so bad. And then in the end of the movie, they're all hanging around together in full view of everyone and opening up a communications hologram, which doesn't draw attention at all. Like the whole idea of the team in the beginning is they're all kind of there, just seated in throughout the crowd and doing their own little things to blend in because they're spying and they're there on a mission, but they're supposed to be clandestine. And then in the end of the movie, hey, they're all yucking it up at one table together. And it's like, really? It just doesn't make any sense. This movie is goofy. You never care about any of the characters except the Deltan woman. I really liked her. I don't know their names, for example, because it didn't matter other than Rachel Garrett and, Georgiou. It, it was just stupid. And, you're supposed to care about this relationship she had with this other character, but they show you the barest bones of it. They don't spend any time developing that. I mean, if it had gone to series, they might have done some of that stuff, but I think they realized it wasn't going to work. And I don't know, made the movie because of the sunken, what is that fallacy where, the sunken cost fallacy. They'd already put so much into it, writing it and building sets or whatever, casting it, that they decided to at least make the movie and maybe even as a tax write-off. But it's just bad. It's a bad movie. It's not even a movie where you could go, oh yeah, it was okay. No, it's worse than that. It's actively bad. It's actively bad because it's full of dumb. And that's all there is to it. Star Trek doesn't even come into it. The idea that it's bad Star Trek, you don't even have to go. It's just a bad movie, period. The fact that it's bad Star Trek is crappy icing on the crappy cake. That's really all there is to say. It's a bad movie. So I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.